In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, how artificial intelligence is impacting cybersecurity.
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I'm your host, Timothy D. Bluck, and in this episode, we will be exploring how artificial intelligence is impacting cybersecurity. With me to do that is Steve Orrin, Federal CTO at Intel. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. You can support the podcast by donating. There's a donate button on the podcast page. You can sign up for the newsletter. I'm trying to get that going. Feedback for the show, you can send to timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. If you hit me up on LinkedIn, let me know you're a podcast listener, and I will happily accept the connection. Rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That's how I get it out there with more and more listeners, because I want to grow this and I want to help the security community. So this was a really good one. I got asked if I wanted to have Steve Orrin on, and I said absolutely, as you'll hear me talk about. He seems like a bit of a generalist, so I didn't really know the topic to cover. But as you can see, we very quickly get into artificial intelligence, which is something that I feel like is definitely a hot topic. I haven't really covered a whole lot on the podcast, so this was just a really good conversation around artificial intelligence. So with that, I mean, let's get right into it. So I was actually trying to find like a topic, because I like having a topic. And usually, I don't know if you've looked at the website, but it's more like, hey, here's a topic to dive into. It's like what to do, how to do. But like you're kind of a little bit all over the place.
I've done a couple of things.
Yeah, you've done a lot. I mean, you've done a lot. You've also been on a lot of podcasts. So I usually like to go listen to podcasts. Usually people are on like one or two. You're on like a lot of them. I didn't listen to all of them.
It was weird. They're supposed to be spread out throughout the year, but then, and I think one of the things that happened is as people start getting more used to doing podcasts and podcasters got better technologies, what used to take 3 or 4 months to put out a recording, they're doing in 2 weeks. And so I had originally planned, we'll do a couple each month, and they'll come out 3, stage it out, and they just all have been coming out.
Just consecutively.
Yeah, consecutively. So like second half of this year, I'll be quiet because everything will be done. But I was trying to do, like sort of stage it out like a month max, and they just all sort of hit all together.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, this one I will tell you, I do have some other ones. I like to batch these, so I like to record a bunch, and then because my content is also more timeless versus timely, so it's meant to be something that people can come back to, and that's what I see a lot of. Like one of my most popular episodes, which was like recorded back in like 2017, is like how to study for the OSCP. I feel like it's tapered off, but like at that time, I had someone on that I passed it, and we had it was like a 3-part episode, but that's probably been one of my most popular ones because everyone was trying to get it. Now it seems like everyone's got it. So.
Right.
So like, do you consider yourself like a generalist then? Because you have all these different areas you dive into, or like, do you have an area?
So if you look at the totality of the things I've done, it would look like I'm a generalist. What I find is that in any given set of couple of years, there are key things I'm focused on and driving. And if you go back long enough, AppSec and the Sanctum days. If you remember that company, that was my whole world. Nowadays, really the 3 areas I'm focused on is nation state level cybersecurity, and both how do we defend and how do we deal with the adversaries. AI is a buzzword that no one can run away from, so we got to talk about it. If we're going to talk about it, let's figure out how to secure this thing and how to understand how to use it properly for security. And then another area, just more in the federal side of the camp, is understanding some of the constraints around doing things end-to-end, edge to cloud, the edge computing, from a government perspective, sort of how does pervasive computing. And it doesn't have to be AI, though everyone seems to fall into that bucket, but it's really about the connecting of sensors together to accomplish mission. So those, in my federal role, those are the 3 things that just keep coming up. The hot topic, the past month or two has really been around sort of the how do I defend myself from the adversary using AI? How do I leverage AI? How do I secure the AI that my company's building? So all of those AI related. Last week, deep fakes came back up as a big topic. It was in the news, and it's a real big challenge because we're heading into an election cycle, and we've got international entities using it for a variety of reasons to sway opinion, and cyber criminals using it to steal $25 million. So you've got the full gamut of what these kind of AI generated, and a deepfake gets all the news, but it's crafted phishing, it's voice, it's chatbots, it's all the tools in their arsenal. And I've been, so when that started coming up again, I did a little cursory look, and actually, what was once just university research, and there's some really cool university, we're starting to see funded companies, some startups get some seed money, some little bit more traditional security companies investing in deepfake detection. And so it's sort of crossed the first of its many chasms of death, if you will.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was wondering. Is I feel like it's such a topic nowadays that it's. I feel like we're getting better at identifying it, and at least people are starting to understand. Like maybe go check to actually see if the source is right, or like I recently did do some voice AI stuff for my CISO and another one of our security engineers, and I had him singing "I'm a Little Teapot." And it was based from public, recordings that they had. But I mean, you can definitely tell with listening to the audio, it's like really good, but it's also like there's certain cadence moments with it. So I feel like deepfakes are a little bit the same way. There's certain things you can identify.
There are, I think, there's sort of two classes. There's the open source tools, the freely available tools that are out there, give you, again, someone who's not looking, someone who's not cybersecurity aware, your grandmother, they'll get tricked with the deep fake. Your classic 16-year-old out on the Facebooks and Twitters will get tricked. The nation states have a whole nother level of capability because they're not just running the deep fake engine, they're actually doing some more adversarial work to improve the output and to refine it. They have access to a broader data set, and they have the time and patience to build a more accurate. And that's where we're starting to see things like biomarkers having to be used. So the AI looks, there's none of that blockiness or visual cues, but there's certain things you can look at from one of the projects is around blood flow in your veins in your face, and that our high def cameras, you and I can't see it, but the cameras are actually capturing on the infrared spectrum the blood flow in your veins, and the regular thump 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 of your heart doesn't replicate in generative AI yet. Eye movements, things along those lines. There's also some interesting work that's being done on analyzing the source file itself. There are sort of markers that from a purely just looking at the video code, some of it is, it's too good. Real world has got noise, and the AI auto corrects for a lot of that noise, not in the visual side, but in sort of the transition between. And that's another indicator, but it requires doing more of a deep code analysis. But we're seeing these techniques being brought to do detection. Or there's the one, and I don't know if you know Gadi Evron, a security guy from Israel, who did Symetra and a couple other startups. When that deep fake happened where someone was attacked and they transferred $25 million, one of the things he recommends, it was a face deep fake, asking the CFO to raise their hand or to give me the thumbs up would have been a quick trick because the AI had trained on the face and had not trained on gesticulation. Now, if someone were to do a deep fake of me, they would catch it because I gesticulate. I can't help it. But that would be one trick, because a face-based deep fake would not have thought to, or would not have captured a hand movement. And so that would have been a quick say, hey, this isn't real. I've asked you, because the chatbot was interactive. He said, can you raise your hand? It was said, well, absolutely. But the AI deepfake itself would not have been able to pull that off. So there, like I said, there's some tricks, and then there's a lot more science that has to go into it. So I know we've talked a lot of things. What do you think would be a fun topic to go into?
I was going to continue on with that. Is that because I think that is a very interesting, and that's really good actionable advice for people too, right? Is raise your hand, because that's to your point. It's like the AI is not expecting that, and I love simplicity insecurity, right? Because I feel like we get into these very complicated things, but at the end of the day, it's also can be very simple things like, hey, raise your hand. Like that's something that I can go back to my leadership and go, okay, if you feel like you're being asked to, or just have it to where, hey, raise your hand or do something, make a symbol or something, right? We talk about like passwords going away. It's like, I had another podcast with Jason E. Street, and he had such a simple way to combat BEC is like send out a postcard with like a word of the month on it to each of the executives, right? And it's a random word. And that is a way to, combat some of that BEC stuff, especially when you're talking about, but it's such a simple solution to put in place.
It's a simple solution that worked really well in the analog world of, intelligence and spying and, where you would have like your code word of the day. Or there are troops in Vietnam where they would have the challenge response words that they would get. It's almost that one-time pad revisited again.
Right.
So sometimes old comes back to save.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say too is I feel like with AI, especially these deep fakes that you're talking about, to me, I have a media arts degree. You can tell a bad Photoshop job. Go on to Amazon and look at some of these obscure things that you're buying. And I was just looking at, I'm a big golfer, so I was looking at like some training golf stuff, and I was like, that is a really bad Photoshop job because the person's holding it and it's like, that should be a club, but it's like they pulled out the training thing. And I'm like, I'm not buying that one because if you're not going to actually take the time to go take pictures, right? So there's ways to, I think there's ways to identify it too. But one of the questions I also had for you, do you feel like, especially with nation states, because to that point, they have a lot more funding, they have a lot more technology, they have access to more advanced research than the public has, right? Are we, how close are we to that Mission Impossible deep fake mask where they're putting the mask on and then they're ripping it off, right? Like how close are we to that kind of technology?
It's an interesting question. I think you look at it from two perspectives. So the deep fake technology in the AI generation that can happen in a digital format. So like you said, video can actually get very hyper realistic, especially if you have the time to do the refinement of the output. Most criminals don't do that. They just do good enough. And I think one of the things we have to recognize is that the Mission Impossible use case is that one-off that you need for that very specific problem, but you'll never see that sort of scale because how often do you need that? Because the vast majority of people are going to be tricked by the simple stuff. So I think we're not far away from a Mission Impossible digital facelift, if you will. I mean, we're really close. The universities can show you what is the art of the possible. You need to have sufficient data of the target individual, and you need to spend the time training, refining, and using an adversarial model to sort of go back and check how good is it. But here's the real question: if I wanted to deep fake something to cause trouble, and actually the scariest one is someone who looks a little bit like you, buying drugs on the street corner through a grainy video, because that's good enough for evidence in a court of law. Street videos are perfectly fine. And so think about, somebody of importance being shown in a seedy area or, doing something, and it's not a high definition deep fake, which honestly for things like the law doesn't have to be. For public opinion, doesn't it? It has to just look a little bit like Timothy, get it close enough. It doesn't. And again, it's not about trying to recreate the perfect you. It's providing the right amount of noise to make it look like it came from an ATM camera. I don't need to be, 4K high def, and I could do significant damage from a misinformation or from a, for instance, you wanted to take out a senator running for Congress. You wanted to, all you need is that cycle, and you can't undo that damage. That's the thing that I think scares most of, CISA and NSA and the various government agencies. It isn't the exquisite high def version. It's the grainy one that gets put out there showing, a general doing something untoward, and suddenly the guy who's running Ukraine operations is discredited, and now Russia gets an advantage. I mean, those are the kind of misinformation campaigns that truly scare people.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on this too, and this was one I was very interested in because I feel I want to talk to someone about this. Is the disinformation going on, especially like you said with the upcoming election, right? Is like what can people do to, because to your point too, it's like you only need like a little bit of evidence, and even if they're cleared at the end of the day, the damage is already done at the front end. Right. The public opinion says a lot, and that can just, and we've seen it already in what the past 2 decades with elections where they're getting disrupted. Now it's not necessarily deepfakes, but it's been hacking and even releasing of that information and disinformation in general. So like, what are you seeing, and like, what are some of the challenges, and how do you combat that?
So the one caveat is I cannot comment on any political party or
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm going to stay neutral on those aspects, but the tools in the arsenal we can definitely talk about.
Yeah,
and then things that we as individuals can do to just be better informed about our news sources. I mean, one joke, and my wife were talking about this the other day, is just shut this thing off. That would be one good use is like disable your accounts. Get off of the social media, because there is absolutely there's no way of really vetting any of the information that's being provided to you through those mechanisms. By definition, they're social. That means it's anybody can upload anything. And the reality is that even our news feeds, and I'm not going to pick on any one news provider, but both of them repost what they find online. And so you're not, where's your authoritative source?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, and this was a check, I was talking to my wife that I'd given some recommendations. When you see something online, a video that disturbs you or that you find, compelling, one of the things I do is you go look for other versions of it. And there's actually some work that's being done, I think, at Facebook and at Google, where they're looking for not deepfakes in the classic AI deepfakes, but where someone takes an image of a battlefield and then superimposes new images on top of it. And what they're doing is they're searching the scene and being able to detect, okay, that's not Ukraine, that's actually Bosnia from the 80s, or that's not Gaza, that's Tunisia from the 90s. Like, they're seeing they can do the quick AI analysis of the graphic image of a snapshot of a video and actually detect where that image was originally taken from, and then was used to create some of these sensational, and we see the same thing. Or you see, there was one example of, I think it was a joke, but they showed as a demonstration of like Obama doing something, I forget what it was, eating at Cosmic Pizza or something like that, and they could they saw the outfit he was wearing, the tie, was actually from him sitting at a different restaurant, and they basically could tell, because they were able to match. They've got the image databases, so were they able to do quick signature lookup to see, has this image or any aspect of it appeared anywhere else? It's a little bit outside of our, individual capabilities, but at least the big companies are starting to think about how would they use the repositories to do a better vetting. And I think they're doing it in anticipation of someone saying "thou shalt."
Well, so like with those images, can't you put that, because ChatGPT is now multimodal and Gemini has been that way for a little bit. Can you not do that with those technologies currently?
You could try. Your mileage will vary.
Fair enough. Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. That's probably. I've had my frustrating moments with some of that stuff, but yeah.
But if you craft your request correctly, for instance, if I upload a video to ChatGPT, where have any of these aspects been found in any other database? The problem is you'll get a lot of false positives.
Gotcha.
But in there will be, if it is a true fake, in there will be the real knowledge. This question is, can you as an individual sort through and do you have time for every image that you're seeing? That's really the challenge that these big companies can do for us if they wanted to.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, and that's good. Right. I mean, and I think that's good that companies are aware of it and trying to, I feel like they really got called out on that, the last couple of elections. So,
yeah.
I mean, the other thing too, with some of this stuff that creates, is that it can be used in the reverse, right? Where someone can go, oh no, that's deep fake, when they may have actually been doing that kind of stuff.
There's one thing in the court of public opinion, there's another in the court of law. In the court of public opinion, it's, whoever believed you before is going to continue to believe you. Whoever didn't believe you before is not going to believe. Like, you're not, it's sort of like we're so polarized in some respects that, saying, hey, every video of me is deep fake, except for the ones I say or not, is self-serving. The challenge is that if you would say, or if it's evidence, if you're saying I wasn't there, the current technological capabilities in most courts aren't able to verify one way or the other, and at the end of the day, we default to precedent. And so until there's enough substantive precedent and change in the art of technology to change the way we evaluate digital videos, for instance, or pictures of people doing things, the precedent is if I caught you on video doing something bad, that's submittable as evidence, as long as I can verify the source of that information, because you have to have a chain of custody. The challenge will be, so for instance, if the police go and they search everyone's phone, they find a picture of you doing something bad, there's a source for that image. It came from that phone. They're going to say, okay, that's a legitimate source. Now, if I uploaded a piece of malware onto your phone that dropped those image files into your camera folder, that's game over because they have an authoritative source. It came from a camera that they can prove took the picture, or at least they can say was in the area. And now that video becomes evidence. And that's one of the challenges is, as we see every time new technologies come up against the way the law works, the law is still based on the fact that we fundamentally assume images are correct. The only time the images are correct is if you can detect like the date was wrong or if it was taken at a different time. But there's the mechanism for verifying that is the attributes of a data file. You and I both know it's really easy to go and edit the attributes of a data file.
Yeah.
So the deep fakes is going to stress our legal system and our justice system as they start to become more pervasive. I mean, there was an article in the Signal magazine, which is one of the government rags that goes out, all about the challenge of deepfakes and misinformation, and how CISA is trying to combat this. I wouldn't say successfully yet, but they've identified it as a key area of focus, both not just for the election, but in general, of how to battle the AI-generated misinformation, deepfakes being one avenue. Online, botnets that are producing social media content or comments are just as pervasive.
And it's almost, I mean, it's a lot like it's essentially just human manipulation too, right? And we're kind of talking from more of a governmental. I mean, and this has been going on for years, but now we've just like I feel like we got to a point where we had a handle on it, but now it's like it's slipping away again to where it's like, how do you know to trust anything really?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, think about it. We dropped leaflets into Vietnam, if you remember those days, and I think we had radio signals of was it Radio Europe back in the World War II? Like the idea of propaganda or
propaganda.
Sort of we call it misinformation now. It was sort of polarized information. Has been used for generations. The two things the internet has done, it is the scale and the ease by which that can happen by any, it doesn't take a country, with planes to drop leaflets. Anybody can do a misinformation campaign pretty successfully. So the scale and the cost to implement have gone, off the charts in both directions. And then the other thing is the AI and the technology has made it a lot more, if you're looking at a leaflet from dropped from a plane, it's coming from. You can choose to believe it, but you know where it's coming from. The AI can make it look like it's your friends talking to you.
Yeah.
And that becomes so much harder to distill between what is truth and what is fiction. And there's, 20 years from now, there will be PhD programs in this era's misinformation campaigns from a psychological perspective, because there's the sort of like at every aspect of our lives, we are being coerced. There's the nation state stuff, and that's, it's like, ooh, that's evil. But when Amazon gets you to buy that gift for your kids, it's not by accident the way they've gotten you to buy that. Yeah. And so, there's a term I recently heard in a book. It's called surveillance capitalism. And it sounds nefarious, but really what it is understanding how a human brain works in order to get them to do the things you want to do. In the case of Amazon, they want you to buy particular things at particular times. And so between ads, between comments, between the things they rate in the comments, when you look at the reviews of an item, it's not by accident the reviews that show up first. And so it's all about getting you to make that purchase. It's the same technique being used by the nation state adversaries to get you to vote one way or another, or to get you to just be so confused you don't want to vote. Same fundamental psychological process. And I think that's where, if we, again, fast forwarding a number of years, there's going to be whole sciences dedicated to understanding that aspect of our psychology, of how we can be easily manipulated by things that we think of as non-intrusive. We're in for some interesting times. Like, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. I mean, and that's something that people forget a lot too, is marketing is probably on the forefront of all this psychological disinformation, whether it's good or bad. Salespeople, I'd even put in that same boat, because that's essentially what they're doing. It's almost social engineering aspect, or it is a social engineering
Yeah.
aspect to it, right?
So us as security people have known about social engineering for many years. Now it's just taken, everyone else has figured it out.
Well, have they? Because I feel like they're still falling for this kind of stuff. But
Okay, I mean the people have figured out how to do it to perform whatever the deed they want to do. Yes.
Well, and I'm one of those people trying to teach other people, like, here's how and I've done that too with people in like a bar. I'm like, when you're really engaged with someone, you actually start mimicking their stuff. And what I've done too in the past is like, and I even told them, I was like, I'll shift my weight and you'll shift your weight too. And then we keep talking, and then I shift my weight and they shift their weight, and I see exactly that. And they go, whoa, like they get freaked out about it. And I fall for this stuff too. It's not like I'm perfect or anything, right? I just bought a bunch of stuff and I was like, God, I totally got, it's not scammed. It's stuff I need, but it's like, I totally got something triggered within me psychologically. They went, hit that buy button.
Exactly. And my kids are absolutely beneficiaries of it.
Or your kids are really good social engineers too. My kids, they know how to pull on your heartstrings there.
Yeah.
But one of the things, I don't want to be entirely dire, because I feel like we are a lot more dire and negative and pessimistic. I do think too, with the advent of the internet and all this stuff, is that we do have a place we can go check. Yes, it takes time to go, like you said, source it and figure that out. But there is more information. I think overall that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And so, shining a light on things, transparency will set you free. It's a theme we're seeing across the board. The more visibility and transparency, whether it be in the AI and how it was built, whether it be into things like SBOM and knowing what the software is, we're seeing that concept of better transparency, better visibility is that, shines the light on the areas to identify the whether it be identifying bad stuff or just giving us a better understanding to make better risk decisions. And that's, like you said, whether it's be getting better understanding of where the information is coming from, you still may choose to believe it, which is fine, but you've actually given an informed decision. I think that we're seeing that across the board as a theme of how we're going to improve our security, improve our risk postures, is better informed decision making.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what are kind of some closing thoughts from you?
So I think the best way to think about this is there are a lot of things to be concerned about when it comes to use of AI against us and some of the adversarial approaches, deep fakes, but also just the being able to trust the information flows that you're getting. The best way to think about it is, I'm going to put it into three areas. And one, there are things we can do as individuals to help protect ourselves, or at least help raise the bar on the things that are coming at us. Like we talked about earlier, little tricks about how to detect deepfakes, verifying the sources of your information. And again, some of this is security hygiene, verifying the emails are coming from a legitimate source, using encryption when you can, making sure you're double checking before doing anything, like don't click on links in email. If a bank is sending you something, don't click the email. Go to your bank and see if it actually came from them, and look at the website. And the website will tell you if you've got an alert in their message box. Little things like that can help us in the companies. And we talked about that example of the deepfake attack that stole 25 million. Yes, that person could have thought to check the deepfake, but even if that was never a part, having a two-phase commit kind of policy. So before money can be transferred out, having an out-of-band check be available to that financial analyst that was being targeted, so that the company would build in the risk controls. And so part of that is just having good policies in place for, even if you can't prevent the attack, prevent the damage, or limit the damage. Maybe reduce bar up to $500,000 can't be done, but over that, you've got to have a two-part or an out-of-band communication to verify, or somebody else has to verify your transaction before it goes through. Those kind of double checks are best practices that we can implement at the small scale. At the larger scale really comes back to building a risk posture and a risk profile for how you're consuming information, or how you're protecting your organization from these kind of things. Obviously, we talked about training is important, but also building in controls. One of the things that was interesting about that attack and several others is that there was some DNS spoofery going on in order to get the image to look like it was coming from a legitimate source. Best practice around DNSSEC and other security practices at the perimeter, again, raise the bar and make it harder for them to insinuate themselves into your organization, or to make it look like they're part of your organization. And then thinking long term, it's we've got to be as aggressive with the technology as the adversary are. We should be adopting these new technologies. I'm not saying deep fakes, but I'm talking the AI, machine learning, and automation for the good of cybersecurity. One of the things, and I've talked about this a lot, and this is really important, is we need to automate the stupid stuff.
Yes.
If you think about your typical InfoSec or IT security person, they spend a large majority of their day firefighting the vast majority of vulnerability patches and pings on the firewall and blips on the dashboard, and they're not dealing with the 20% really hard APT problems. And that's the life. And they're underfunded, underslept, and overworked and miserable. And the reality is we can help them if we use AI and machine learning and script-based automation to automate vulnerability patching, disclosure, understand what CVEs and understanding your inventory database and correlating that data to actually automate that process. And one of the things I posit, it's better for your CEO to lose email for 30 minutes than to have a data breach. And it's educating the C-suite to understand that sometimes automation may break things, but you're doing it in the mode of protecting the organization for something much worse and building resiliency into your system so that when the email goes down because of the patch, you can quickly roll it back and fix it all in an automated fashion. Will allow you, if you automate the 80% of the stupid stuff, then your underfunded small cybersecurity team can focus on the really hard problems like AI deep fakes and put into place the right controls that can deal with that more problematic next wave of attack, because we know how to deal with vulnerabilities and patching. So let's automate that. And that's where we can use AI to our advantage.
Yeah, that's very. I agree with you completely, because I've used it for in my role, I've automated a lot, and it's so great now because I know PowerShell, but I will tell you AI knows PowerShell way better than I do, and I can and then once I create something, kind of create like an MVP, I'm able to go, okay, what about adding this? What about adding this? So I'm actually getting rid of all the manual steps that I would do with that, in my experience, I don't know if you're seeing this. It's really, there's not as much people adopting it as they should, and then also they're kind of stuck in this. Well, it's AI. They're very concerned about the risk of losing their company data in the AI tool itself. So there's a lot of conversation, and I feel like just a lot of bureaucracy around even just using AI at this point.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think one thing to recognize, I'm not suggesting you put all your cool stuff into ChatGPT, and that's not the right approach. There are open source tools, open source miniaturization, specific models that you can bring down, put onto your local prem, or put into your cloud, into your instances where the IP you're worried about protecting can be contained. I mean, that is actually the wave we're seeing right now in the AI industry, the move from the huge large language model to the adoption into the domain specific AI for particular verticals or for particular companies. And it's really the whole process of RAG is the hot topic. It's all about taking those big models and then training them on my specific area and reducing them down to something that I can run in a rack of servers, either virtually or locally, to do my particular organizational tasks. And so the idea is that, again, some of that is FUD of, well, if I give it away, because in the early days, everyone put stuff out on ChatGPT and it learned all your IP. There are ways of doing miniaturization or bringing it on-prem, or in the case of a cloud, bringing it into your cloud domain and separating it from the mothership, because you don't need to continually train on Shakespeare's plays anymore. You want it to train on your contract management, but you want to make sure the feedback loop doesn't go back to ChatGPT. And so that's the new model. And when it comes to cybersecurity, the reality is that you're not talking about a whole lot of IP there. You're talking about your scripts for automating, the Ansible Tower or whatever you're using for your Terraforms. And you're talking about the CVEs. And the only thing that may be something you want to protect is, what is your asset inventory? What are the products that you've got deployed? I think in a future world, we'll become less worried about whether or not someone knows I'm running Oracle 7 or, Tomcat 25, and more want to make sure that we're all collaborating to know when there's a new Log4j style vulnerability in those things. And so there'll be more information sharing in the future, but really pointing the AI at those more mundane or everyday kind of tasks. And the other thing that you started to talk about, I think I want to fill the other end, not just automating the patch, but one of the cool things about AI, you can automate the testing. You can actually have the AI perform a variety of different permutations of the environment in an automated fashion and look for any deviation from the norm as far as the application runtime. and identify before you deploy the patch in an automated way. Well, this patch will fix everything of the vulnerability, but there's one app over here that does a report twice a week is going to blow up. And then identify that problem long before it becomes a problem. Again, automation and AI will help set us free if we're willing to adopt it and move it into production on these key areas, but not trying to, go point it at all the really cool things that our businesses do. It's some of the internal processes where I think we'll see some of the biggest bang in the buck.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that actually brings up a question for me: is how do you think it handles like legacy applications or stuff that's just really old? Do you feel like it's going to do a better job just because it has all that information from the internet documentation and stuff?
So your mileage of it really is going to depend. I can't say that it's going to always do a really good job on legacy applications, but one of the nice things is that applications have been out there for a long time that have large knowledge bases, support documents, multiple versions. There's the opportunity to train on a much larger data set than some new app that just showed up today. The other is that you don't always have to train on the application. So if you're running an old version of some ERP application, you really want to train it on what are your business processes and what are the APIs that you're interfacing to in order to understand how that application runs in your environment. So some of it may be just looking at the local network flows of how it's being executed. In some cases, you may want to be able to model that application, especially if you're doing development work. And there, like I said, there's ways to train. It's really about understanding what is your mission outcome? What is it you're trying to accomplish? In the case of doing patch management, you actually want to model the runtime to be able to figure out, okay, what changed from if I run this application through a 6-month period, in a virtualized environment at full speed, are there changes that this patch introduced? Like I said, when you do the quarterly reports, suddenly you have a new function that's being called that was just turned off because that feature was deprecated for the patch. That's something that it can help you identify without having to know what application was actually running behind it. But you're detecting a change in behavior.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's such a great tool. I'm telling people, like, if you're not using it now, you might be out of a job in the next 5 to 6 years because, and especially this newer generation is using it too, right? They're coming up with AI. That's the struggle for universities is this paper written by them or by AI? I think some of the best professors are going, no, use AI, but it's still going to be graded based on, are you getting the right information? Are you still have to cite stuff? That's all useful stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when ChatGPT first started getting popular and a whole bunch of schools started banning it. And I made the comment that we shouldn't, not only should we not ban it, but we should help teach kids how to use it, because what you really want to train them to do is to be able to generate a paper that is exactly the way that, with the understanding of what they're trying to get. The goal is to understand what Shakespeare's meaning. And you can't get ChatGPT to give you that meaning unless you ask it the right questions in the first place. And so help them create good queries and good prompts. Well, and they'd have to read enough to be able to do that. And I think it's helping them to leverage the technology as opposed to trying to keep the technology out, because let's face it, it's here. They're going to get it on their phone anyway. And the same is true inside corporations. A lot of people started trying to block ChatGPT. The real question is, how do you use it in a responsible way? How do you put the right policies in? Don't put in PII, don't put in your corporate IP, but also how do you use it in a way that allows you to advance your capabilities as opposed to just outright blocking it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, cool. Steve, I appreciate the conversation. I think we did find the topic, AI, just in general. Kind of covered the gamut there, which I really appreciate. So thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And that will do it. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't, email me at timothy.dblock@exploresec.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know what you didn't learn, and we'll cover it in a future podcast. We'll see you next time, Cybersecurity Explorers.